All right, strap in, everybody. We're diving deep into a tech battle that's got the whole internet buzzing. HomeaZZon versus Stripe.
Yeah, this one is a doozy. We've got leaked emails, Reddit threads that are going absolutely crazy, and even some whispers about a potential lawsuit.
Oh, wow, a lawsuit.
It's serious stuff, and it really raises some big questions about how much power these huge tech platforms have over smaller companies.
Okay, well, let's rewind a bit and give everyone the background on this whole thing. We've got to start with HomeaZZon.
Right, so HomeaZZon, you've got Bobby G, the founder.
And he's got some pretty serious tech cred, right?
Oh yeah, he's worked with some of the biggest names in the game, IBM, AT&T.
Definitely not some random guy who just decided to start a tech company.
Nope, not at all. And he poured years of his life into building HomeaZZon. It's a platform that's designed to connect all the different players in the real estate world.
So property managers, tenants, vendors, that kind of thing.
Exactly. He wanted to bring everyone together, make everything more efficient, more transparent. And there's another layer to this, too.
Oh.
Bobby G had this really inspiring vision to empower Black communities through entrepreneurship, using HomeaZZon as a foundation to build a whole ecosystem. It's a pretty big idea.
Yeah, it really is. And it sounds like things were going really well for them at first. I mean, they partnered with Microsoft, expanded into a bunch of different markets.
Yeah, they were on track to have millions of users.
Yeah.
Everything was looking up. And when it came time to choose a payment processor, they went with one of the giants, Stripe.
Which, at the time, seemed like a pretty natural choice.
Totally. Stripe is like the gold standard for online payments, it's super reliable, tons of features. It seemed like a perfect match.
But then, things went sideways, didn't they?
Big time. HomeaZZon was killing it right out of the gate, Processed over $75,000 in less than a week. That's almost 5,000 transactions.
Whoa, that's a dream start for any company.
You would think. But then, out of nowhere, Stripe just slams on the brakes.
What? They just shut them down. Just like that.
Pretty much. They suspended HomeaZZon's account, froze all their funds, and started issuing refunds to customers.
Hold on, what was their reason for doing that?
They claimed that HomeaZZon was engaging in high-risk activity and might be violating their terms of service.
But wait, HomeaZZon was saying they were totally transparent, that there weren't any customer complaints or anything that would suggest fraud.
Exactly. So
Okay.
right off the bat, you've got these two completely different narratives.
It's a classic he said, she said, but with a ton of money hanging in the balance.
Yeah, it's a messy situation.
Yeah.
And to really understand what happened, we need to dig into the evidence.
Okay, so let's start with the communication between Bobby G and Stripe. What can you tell us about those emails?
Well, let me tell you, things got pretty heated pretty quickly. You can practically feel the tension through the screen.
So Bobby G was fighting back.
Oh yeah, he was pushing hard, trying to get some straight answers from Stripe, sending them detailed records of all his transactions, pointing out that there weren't any actual disputes.
And what was Stripe's response?
It's almost unbelievable, really. They were giving these super vague answers, mentioning clauses in their terms of service that, when you actually looked them up, didn't even exist.
Are you serious?
Dead serious.
Yeah.
They just kept repeating that high-risk line without actually explaining what HomeaZZon was supposedly doing wrong.
Oh man, I can't even imagine how frustrated he must have been.
It gets even wilder. Bobby G even brought up that other payment processors, companies like Finix, PayKings, ZenPay.
I've heard of those. They're supposed to be more startup friendly, right?
Exactly. Known for being a lot more flexible when it comes to onboarding. And guess what? All of them were totally fine working with HomeaZZon.
No way.
Yeah. They reviewed everything and didn't see any red flags, so it really makes you wonder what Stripe's deal was.
It's almost like they were looking for a reason to shut them down.
You can't help but think that. It really highlights the kind of power imbalance that exists between these big platforms and startups.
So what did Bobby G do? I mean, he must have been at his wit's end.
Well, he decided to fight fire with fire, so to speak.
What do you mean?
He took his story public, went straight to Reddit, hoping to find some answers, maybe get some support from the community.
That's a bold move, going up against a giant like Stripe in the court of public opinion.
It was a gamble, for sure, but it didn't take long for those Reddit threads to blow up.
Okay, so let's talk about that Reddit firestorm. Things are about to get interesting. So those Reddit threads, did they blow up like you said?
Oh yeah, big time. It turned into this massive online debate. You had tons of people rallying behind Bobby G, defending him. But then you had this whole other group who were like, wait a minute, is HomeaZZon even legit?
It's like the internet does best, right? Taking sides and digging in.
That's what they do. But it really highlights the complexities of this whole situation, right? So the people who were on Bobby G's side, they were really focused on how Stripe handled everything.
I can see that. It's easy to sympathize with the little guy going up against a giant corporation.
Right. A lot of them felt like Stripe wasn't being transparent at all.
Yeah.
Like, those vague responses, the whole high-risk thing without any specifics.
And that's got to be frustrating. Like, you're being accused of something, but you don't even know what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It felt like they were just throwing out these accusations without giving him a chance to defend himself.
So it sounds like there was a lot of distrust towards Stripe.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, I think this whole thing really tapped into a broader distrust of big tech in general.
I mean, you hear about it all the time, right? The power these companies have, how hard it is to hold them accountable.
That's exactly it. A lot of people are worried about how these big platforms can basically make or break a smaller company, and there's not a lot you can do about it.
Yeah, like you're at their mercy, almost. But you were saying there was another side to this whole debate. People who were questioning HomeaZZon.
Yeah. Some folks started digging into HomeaZZon's website, their social media, and they started to raise some eyebrows.
What kind of stuff did they find? What made them suspicious?
Well, some of the language on the website was kind of vague, like not really clear about the specifics of their services.
Mhm.
And they were putting a lot of emphasis on future projections, particularly about this HCZ coin they kept mentioning.
Oh, the crypto stuff? I knew that was going to come up. That's a whole other can of worms, right?
You said it.
Yeah.
And with a company like Stripe, they're under a microscope when it comes to financial regulations. Crypto is like the big red button for them. Even just mentioning it can set off alarm bells.
Yeah, they have to be so careful about things like money laundering, illegal activities. It makes sense that they would be cautious.
Right, and some people felt like HomeaZZon was playing with fire, bringing crypto into the picture.
So even if they weren't doing anything wrong at that exact moment, just having that connection to crypto could be seen as risky.
Exactly. And then there was that wallet feature on the platform, which some people felt was a clear violation of Stripe's terms of service, especially since HomeaZZon was talking about integrating cryptocurrency eventually.
So it's not just about what they were doing, but also what they were planning to do.
Right. It's all about risk assessment. Stripe has to think about the future, too.
Mm-hmm.
And even the people who were critical of HomeaZZon, they still agree that Stripe could have handled things way better.
So even if they had legitimate concerns, they messed up the communication.
Big time. Communication is key in any situation, especially when you're dealing with something as sensitive as this. If Stripe had sat down with Bobby G, said, okay, here's what we're seeing, here's why we're concerned, and gave him a chance to explain.
It might have avoided this whole mess.
Maybe. At least it would have shown that they were trying to be fair, But instead, they just went straight to the nuclear option. And that, I think, is what really rubbed people the wrong way.
Yeah, it reinforces that whole image of big tech companies being unapproachable, unwilling to listen.
Exactly. It feeds into that narrative. So you've got this huge online debate, people arguing back and forth. What was Bobby G doing during all this?
I mean, was he just sitting back, watching it all unfold?
Oh, no, not at all. Bobby G was very active in those threads, passionately defending HomeaZZon, calling out what he felt were inconsistencies in Stripe's actions.
Really digging into the details, huh?
Oh, yeah, he's in the trenches. And he even brought up the fact that HomeaZZon is a Black-owned business, suggesting that maybe there was some bias at play.
Wow, that's a pretty serious accusation.
It is, and we can't really speculate on Stripe's motives. But, it's important to acknowledge that systemic inequalities exist in every industry, including tech. And sometimes, unfortunately, those biases can influence decisions and outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make. So zooming out a bit, what are the big takeaways from this whole Reddit firestorm? What can we learn from all of this?
I think the biggest lesson is that these big tech companies, they need to be way more transparent, especially when their decisions can have such a huge impact on smaller businesses. Stripe's lack of clear communication, their unwillingness to really engage with Bobby G.
It just made the whole situation worse.
Yeah, absolutely. It created this perception that they weren't being fair or reasonable, and it fueled a lot of the anger and distrust.
And it also highlights the power dynamics at play, right? These platforms have so much power, and it can feel like smaller companies are just completely at their mercy.
It's a David and Goliath situation for sure. And for startups, I think this is a wake-up call. They need to be aware of these potential risks, and they need to be prepared to protect themselves.
So where does this leave HomeaZZon and Stripe? I mean, the Reddit battle might be over, but the war is far from won, right?
Oh, yeah, this is just the beginning. Bobby G is determined to clear his company's name, and he wants his funds released. He's not backing down.
And we have some notes here about a potential legal battle, which sounds like it's going to be pretty explosive. So Bobby G, he sounds ready to take this all the way to court. What can you tell us about these legal notes we have?
Well, these notes give us a glimpse into the strategies that both sides are cooking up. It's going to be a real clash of the titans, and it could have huge implications for the whole tech world.
Okay, let's break it down. What kind of legal arguments is HomeaZZon likely to use?
They're going to come out swinging, that's for sure. They're going to hammer home the fact that Stripe shut them down out of the blue, no warning, nothing. Remember, they had processed thousands of transactions with zero issues, and then suddenly their account is frozen, their funds are locked up, and their reputation is in the toilet.
That's got to be a nightmare for any business, let alone a startup that's trying to grow.
Yeah, it's brutal. And HomeaZZon isn't just looking to get their money back, they're going for the big guns. Millions of dollars in damages.
Whoa, millions. That's a lot of money.
It is. But they're claiming lost revenue, integration costs, the whole works. They're saying Stripe's actions weren't just unfair, they caused serious harm to their business.
So basically, they have to prove that Stripe was in the wrong, that they acted unjustly and didn't have enough evidence to shut them down.
You got it. And they're doing that by meticulously documenting every single interaction they had with Stripe. Every email, every phone call, everything.
So they're building a paper trail to show that Stripe messed up.
Exactly. They're pointing out all the inconsistencies, like Stripe referencing clauses that don't exist, the fact that they never gave any specific examples of this supposed high-risk activity.
So it's like they're saying, look, not only were you wrong, but you were sloppy about it too.
That's the gist of it. They're building a case that Stripe was acting arbitrarily, didn't give them a fair chance to defend themselves.
Okay, but isn't it also on HomeaZZon to prove that they were operating legitimately?
Absolutely. And they're doing that too. They're presenting evidence of all the steps they took to prevent fraud, the security measures they had in place, you name it.
So it's like they're saying, hey, we were doing everything by the book, we were being responsible.
Yeah. And they're even highlighting how other big companies treated them. Like Microsoft. They had a great partnership with them. Microsoft was super supportive.
So they're trying to show that other tech giants didn't have a problem with them.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a pretty clever strategy. But now let's talk about Stripe. What kind of legal defense are they likely to use?
Yeah, what's their side of the story going to be?
Well, they're going to hunker down behind their terms of service, that's for sure. They'll say HomeaZZon violated certain clauses, particularly those related to restricted businesses, high-risk activities.
So that whole crypto thing is going to be a big part of their argument, right?
Oh, yeah. The wallet feature, the HZZ coin. Stripe is going to say that even the intention to incorporate cryptocurrency was enough to classify HomeaZZon as a restricted business, and that justified their decision to suspend the account and hold the funds.
And they'll probably point to the speed and volume of HomeaZZon's transactions too, right?
You betcha. They'll say it was all happening too fast, too much money flowing in, and that raised red flags for them.
So basically, it's going to come down to a battle of interpretations. HomeaZZon will say Stripe overreacted and acted unfairly, and Stripe will say they were just following the rules.
You nailed it. And the big thing here is going to be the burden of proof. HomeaZZon has to convince the court that Stripe was wrong, while Stripe just has to show they had a reason for what they did.
That's a tough one. So what do you think? Who's going to win this thing?
It's hard to say, really. It could go either way. But this case is about way more than just HomeaZZon and Stripe. It could set a precedent for the whole tech world.
You're right. It could change how these platforms operate, how startups deal with them.
Exactly. It raises some big questions for all of us. What responsibilities do these platforms have? How can startups protect themselves when the rules are so murky?
This whole thing has really made me think, we started with what seemed like a simple payment dispute, but it's turned into something so much bigger.
I know, right? And we might not have all the answers, but at least we're starting the conversation, and that's a big step.
So, just to wrap things up, let's leave our listeners with something to think about. What if HomeaZZon had never mentioned cryptocurrency at all? No HZZ coin, no wallet feature, just a plain old property management platform. Do you think this whole situation would have even happened?
That's a good question. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Would Stripe have still seen them as high risk? Would the whole Reddit thing have gone the same way? It's impossible to know for sure, but it shows how tricky this whole thing is, the tension between innovation and regulation.
It's definitely not black and white, that's for sure.
Nope. And that's why it's so important to stay informed, to ask questions, and to keep these big tech companies accountable.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap things up. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful.
And hopefully it'll inspire you to keep digging, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for a fairer and more transparent tech world.